morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion on this Wednesday morning. Yes, it's hump day, and here we are once again. Yesterday, Tuesday, we had a really interesting day within the markets. They were getting hit a little bit to the downside early on. What was really causing a lot of confusion and really getting slammed, crude oil down 8% yesterday. It was getting slammed pretty good. Tried to hold on to 100, didn't really work out so well, and got all the way down to the 95, just underneath 96 area. So definitely taking it on the chin for crude. Now, crude was not the only commodity that was getting slammed, though. We had copper down about 5% yesterday, nat gas down about 3%. We had wheat down about 5%. We had corn down about 7%. Gives you a little bit of an idea. We were seeing a lot of that in the commodities world getting slammed. A lot of people were concerned about what about tomorrow? What's going to happen with this report? What's CPI going to look like? With some of those fears in the final hour, that's where we really did see things change dramatically in the markets, getting slammed pretty hard, over 100 points to the downside for the Dow in that final hour. Finished the day down nearly 200 points. And then you look at the NASDAQ down about 80 points the final hour to finish down a little over 100 points, 107 points to the downside. The 2-year and the 10-year kind of hanging around that 3 level, both of them. The 2-year just above 3, 10-year just below 3. We did have a pretty good spike also yesterday with the volatility index back up over 27. That was something that I thought was worth following very closely because we'd gotten there ourselves into a position there into the 24s. And then we started this little bit of a move this week to the upside. We're seeing again today, as a matter of fact, volumes extremely light. We talk about how these volumes have been light for the month of July. I wanted to run some numbers past you. Yesterday, a little over 31 million contracts trading. Any other year, that sounds great. This year, not so great. We were averaging 42 million contracts per day. Now we're averaging 40.8 million contracts per day. July, we're only averaging a little over 34 million contracts a day. Gives you a little bit of an idea. A very, very slow start to the month of July as we've gotten into trading. Yesterday, every single sector finished in the red. It was energy that was definitely getting pounded, down about 2% yesterday. Chevron, Conoco, BP, all getting hammered pretty good to the downside. Then you look over at technology. That was down as well. Not terrible, but down about 1.3%. Names like Netflix and Google and Microsoft. You mentioned, if you heard me right, you didn't hear Apple in that group either, by the way. But those other names definitely pulling on things a little bit. Healthcare. Healthcare has been one of those areas that seems to be fighting around a little bit through the markets and doing a little bit better, but not so much yesterday. Merck, J&J, Procter & Gamble. You look over at Bristol-Myers, all of those in the negative territory. All, when you look at that group, down a little over 1%. Consumer discretion with Amazon and Tesla, kind of the same story. A little bit of pressure yesterday. Not huge, but a little bit of pressure yesterday and a little bit of settling down in those two stocks, at least for yesterday. Not so much today. Got a nice little bit of a surprise for you today. So what was really having a pretty decent day yesterday? Well, airlines had a good day with American, United, and Delta, all in very strong positive territory, along with the cruise ships. When you look at names like Carnival, names like Royal, names like Norwegian trading a little bit better, along with BA. When you look at Boeing, it's actually had more solid days of late than we've been seeing for a little bit of a while. Also throw in Wynn. And also, when you look, it was Twitter, it was Lucid. So we were seeing a little bit of movement in there. But on the negative side, names like ServiceNow getting absolutely hammered yesterday. Those beta Energames, along with the big boys, getting hit to the downside pretty hard. You had names like Datadog and CrowdStrike and Palo Alto Networks. We also had Microsoft and Salesforce. Throw in a little bit of Nike as well. Gives you a lot of idea why the Dow was getting hit pretty hard yesterday. Speaking of getting hit hard, it's getting hit hard again today when you look at what's going on in the pre-market. Now, in the pre-market early on, really early on, things didn't look too bad. As we started to get closer and we hit that CPI number, 9.1, they were looking for an 8.8 number. Wow, June was hot. Man, well, that hit the markets. Then we slid pretty good. Down 370 for the Dow, down about 250 for the NASDAQ. NASDAQ's kind of fought back much better. The NASDAQ started getting a little bit better as we've gotten into this first hour. Last I looked, it was down about 130, but then started to look like we were a little bit closer, maybe 110. Then I look over at the Dow itself. It was getting hammered just as bad as it was before. Matter of fact, it's been down over 400 points. Last I looked, it was sliding. It was all the way down about 440 points on the low, but it was starting to get back off of that a little bit, got towards about, call it about 400 to the downside. Crude kind of hovering around that 95 level. You got the 2 year, as I mentioned, the 10-year. They're just very, very close still to that 3% area, a little bit better for the 2 year right now, a little bit over that 3 and hanging right around that 3 with the 10-year. Keeping a very close eye on what's going on there. When we look over at the VIX into the 28s, that's a bit of a statement. Get a little bit closer and a little bit closer towards that 30, maybe even get up towards 32 if we continue to see some of the pounding that we're seeing in the markets and some of the nervousness that people have right now. Nat gas. Now, this stood out because I just mentioned the fact that everything was kind of shifting around yesterday. Well, nat gas today up about 5%. Matter of fact, trading around 660 or thereabouts. Give you a little bit of an idea what's going on, despite the fact that we're seeing crude, as I said, trading closer towards that 95 level. Delta, the news story of the day as far as earnings are concerned, probably would be Delta. You look at Delta. Delta put out their numbers, their earnings missed. When you look at the revenue, it was a little bit lighter, but let's call it just basically in line. But you look at the earnings, not so great. As a matter of fact, about 20 cents short of what the estimates were looking for. That's getting pounded pretty good. I think it was down 5 or 6%. Talked about some of those capacity numbers and all the rest of it, but that also a little bit underneath those estimates that people had as well, despite the fact that they have had a significant bounce back. So we'll keep an eye on the airlines as well. So consumer discretion, very early on, that was the reason, and that was really what was getting pushed the hardest in the pre-markets and early on, down a little over 2%. Tech was down about 2%. That's recovered a little bit, along with consumer discretionary recovering a little bit. Materials, not so much, still close to about a 2% drop early on. Industrials, a little over 1.5% or so. Financials are the ones that are really starting to get beat up pretty good, at least in this first hour. Things can change very rapidly. Energy was really interesting. We started off the day with everything in the red. Energy very rapidly turned into the green. It was up almost 1%, and then that rolled back over, down about 0.5% or so. So it gives you a little bit of idea. We got a lot moving in these early first minutes and hour or so of the market. Certainly a lot going on. Twitter having a pretty solid day today. Very, very strong. Beta Energy had a little bit of a pop today, despite the fact that we're not seeing a whole lot of movement in the price of crude. Those beta names are popping back up pretty good, along with names like Kroger, along with Clorox. When you look at some of those names, people are going for a little bit of the quote-unquote safety trade. You look at some of those Chinese names actually on the leadership side early on, at least JD and NetEase and Baidu, along with Lucid when we're looking at some of these various names. But I mentioned those airlines. It's not just Delta. The rest of the names are following along. They've got earnings, I believe, next week as well. But American getting hit a little bit, United getting hit a little bit, of course, in sentiment. So that's not unusual. Fastenal getting hit pretty good today. Look at some of those casino type names with names like Penn National, and then throw in Caesars and so forth. A little bit of Zoom, Airbnb. Nvidia was down decently today early on as well. Some of those chips maybe taking it on the chin, along with Salesforce and Boeing. Now, Boeing's been all over the place. We know that, but that certainly has been a very, very interesting name. Speaking of interesting names, I got two unusuals, and then we're out of here for the take for the day. First one I'm going to give you is Tellurian. Never heard of it, I'm sure. Tell. That this is a name. It's a Houston E&P name down there. It's an interesting name, a lot with the LNG world as well. A little bit over $3 is where the stock was trading. We had two hits today early on. One was way out in October. Let's go with the little bit closer one that we're looking at with the August. They bought 5,200 of the August 3.5 calls. Those are going for about 35 cents. I mentioned October as well. They were buying the 4 calls out there. So 2 buyers in the same day on a day where you're not really looking for a lot of energy buyers, but certainly seeing twice today in Tellurian. That was pretty interesting. Luminar is my next one. LAZR. Now, this is auto parts, the sensors, software side of that whole thing has had a really rough run, but seems like every single put buyer we've seen starting at about $10 down to where it is now, underneath 6. They've been right. They've been right. They've been sizable, and they continue to be right. And the stock has been drifting lower and lower and lower and lower. So today, stock was trading a little over $5.90. We had a buyer of 50,000. This is day 2 of seeing size trades in here. 50,000 of the August 12th expiring, the 5.5 put. So looking for a little bit of a push even from here to the downside. Those are going anywhere from, call it between 50 cents and a little over 60 cents for those options. So we are seeing some pretty interesting option paper there. Stock's been hammered. Looks like somebody doesn't think the hammering's done just yet. Maybe it's got a little bit more. Seeing these huge put buyers. It was spread off, by the way. And that's where you're buying one put, selling a lower strike put. That's exactly what they were doing here in these August 12th 5.5 puts. Keep an eye on that one. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, get educated. You're going to want to get educated, because I can tell you this, the derivatives market is exciting. It's fun. It gives you leverage, gives you opportunity, hedging, all kinds of different ways that you can approach the markets. You can find it anywhere. You can go on the internet. You can go into the books. You can go into the educational guys, but it's definitely well worth it. Folks, have a great day of trading.